What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with This Week at Bungie. And of course that means that we do have some Destiny 2 news to talk about, and so Bungie outlined not one but two updates we're going to be seeing to the game over the next couple of weeks. There are a bunch of general changes and fixes, but also some stasis tuning that we've spoken about recently. We'll break down when to expect all of that. They also speak about Grandmaster Nightfalls, and the winning armor set for the Festival of the Lost in 2021. Of course, we got to vote on that last week. They also speak about the return of trials, reset time changes, and more, which we'll break down in the video. So guys, as always, I hope you find this one useful, but now let's get into it. And first up, they do say, of course last week, they held the first ever community survey to determine which upcoming Festival of the Lost ornament set will be available. They say there were just over 200,000 votes cast, but a clear winner emerged, and dinosaurs win. Of course, that probably isn't a massive surprise. They go ahead and show some community art right there from Jarhinge. And so we will be getting the dinosaur set later this year with Festival of the Lost. But they say for all of you monster movie lovers, don't fret. While Team Dinos have won the day by a fairly significant margin, there's still an opportunity in the future for those sweet armor ornaments to see the light of day. And so give us your thoughts about that as always. But next, before we get into patch note changes and stuff like that, they do point out that Daylight Saving Time 2021 begins on Sunday, March 14th in the USA. And so the daily and weekly reset ritual time will be 10 AM Pacific, up until November later on this year. So bear that one in mind. And they also say as a result of testing being done on clans to help resolve an ongoing issue, Clan XP will be temporarily disabled on Tuesday, March 16th. And they point out we'll need to stay tuned to Bungie Help on Twitter for more information. But also, they've resolved the issue that prevented Trials of Osiris from being active the past 2 weekends, and it will be re-enabled and active at the daily reset on Friday, March 12th, which of course is tomorrow. So the good news is that Trials is returning this week. But next they give us an update preview for a patch we'll see on March 16th, so that'll be on next week's reset. And for the Fallen Saber, they fixed an issue where the strike boss would not spawn until all players were alive and present. They've improved objective waypoint behavior, some grammatical errors, and a couple of other bugs. But also for Devil's Lair, Sepix Prime now has a health bar. They fixed some floating environment objects, and some other basic fixes once again that you can see on screen. For armor though, they fixed the problem where the linear actuator's exotic perk for the Dune Marchers wasn't triggering properly. Font of Might no longer displays a generic damage boost string when its benefit is active, and they fixed a bug where the Mantle of Battle Harmony and Omnioculus exotics were not displaying their flavor text. And then Omnioculus will no longer grant melee energy when making only yourself invisible under some circumstances, and Curious of the Falling Star will no longer grant an overshield when used with supers other than Thunder Crash. And then they also fixed an issue where flavor text wasn't appearing for several weapons, added Rumble to the end of Dead Man's Tales Reload, adjusted Risk Runner's perk VFX that were causing epileptic issues, reduced Arbalist's aim assist, making it harder to hit headshots in the Crucible, so a bit of a nerf to the Arbalist right there. And then they've set the Frenzy and Cranial Spike perks to use the correct buff icons, fixed Tiku's Divination's missing kill feed icon, and then they say they also have a round of stasis balancing slated for March 23rd. And so for Hunters, they've removed damage resistance from Shadow Dive, added a 4-second cooldown between activations of Shadow Dive, and then for Withering Blade, they've decreased Withering Blade's damage against players from 90 to 65 damage, and PvE damage will be unchanged. Decreased Withering Blade slow stacks applied to players from 60 to 40 stacks, once again unchanged in PvE, and then decreased the target acquisition range of Withering Blade after it impacts a player from 12 to 8 meters. Then for the Titan's Glacial Quake, they've removed AoE freeze against players on Supercast. This will still be active in PvE, reduced damage resistance while in Super from 60 to 50%, increase the energy cost of using Shiver Strike while in Glacial Quake from 3 to 7% super energy, and then using the combo of Shiver Strike into a heavy slam attack will now cost the full super energy of both Shiver Strike and Slam, and it previously only costed energy for the Slam. And then for Shiver Strike specifically, they've increased downwards velocity applied to Shiver Strike players when they are slowed to pull them out of the air more strongly. And then finally, for the Warlock Winter's Wrath, they've improved the tracking of the projectiles, now tracking strength decays from its max value over 10 seconds instead of 2.2 seconds. They've increased the size of the Warlock super projectile proximity detonation from 1.5 meters to 1.65 meters radius, and then the proximity detonation now starts at its largest and scales down to 40% over time. Plus, they've decreased penumbral blast damage against players from 80 to 30 damage. Pretty big change right there. PvE will be unchanged. And then they fixed a bug where Ice Flare bolts would continuously try to switch targets, increased target acquisition range of Ice Flare bolts by 33%, and increased turning speed of Ice Flare bolts so they can more effectively hit nearby targets. And then there's also one for Chaos Reach here. They've decreased the amount of super energy refunded when cancelling Chaos Reach early. So let us know your thoughts on those, but there are some general changes. So for the Duskfield grenade, they've reduced how strongly it pulls players inwards. That's a PvP change. They've also reduced the slow stacks applied to players by grenade detonation from 20 to 10 stacks. Again, that's unchanged in PvE, and they've reduced slow stacks applied to players on each tick of grenade from 10 to 5 stacks. And adjusted the UI presentation of slowed to display the slow stacks as X out of 100 instead of X out of 10. And then they've reduced crystal shatter damage against players from 85 max and 55 minimum to 55 max and 25 minimum, reduced Whisper of Chain's damage resistance bonus while in super from 25% to 5%, and that only affects damage from other guardians while you're in a super. And then they fixed a bug where players could continuously proc Whisper of Torment while standing inside of an opponent's barricade, and significantly reduced objective completion values for all Crucible Stasis Fragment quests. Which of course will be kind of useful if you're completing those quests in the future, but not so useful if you've already done them right. So those are the changes that we're going to see across 2 patches, one next week on the 16th and another on March 23rd. But also Bungie do point out that Grandmaster Nightfalls are returning, and that's going to be next week on March 16th, and this will be the first opportunity to earn Adept weapons through a PvE activity. And those Adept versions will be dropping specifically through the Grandmaster difficulty. These weapons grant additional stat bonuses when masterworked and can be socketed with Adept weapon mods, and we can earn these mods in both Trials and Grandmaster Nightfalls. So that should be a fun one to jump into next week. Now though, let's touch on a couple of extra items of feedback from inside of the community. And initially for the weekly challenges that have rolled out this season, players have pointed out that it would be useful to have some of the more long-form pursuits for the season actually be retroactive. So we do have the init for the Infamy weekly challenge at the moment, and you need a bunch of Infamy resets inside of Gambit. And so players have said it should have been closer to the start of the season, or should have been retroactive, and Cosmo said this is a good note and I'll pass the feedback along. Who knows, we might see Bungie change that before the end of the season to be retroactive to ones that we've already done, because a lot of the stuff inside of the season challenges is actually retroactive, so it might not even be a kind of intentional design point. And DMG also said they're glad that players are broadly enjoying the system, and while things like masterworking a piece of armor can be costly, there are multiple weeks to actually do it. And he once again points out that they have seen the comments on the Infamy ranks not being retroactive, as well as confusion on which objectives are retroactive and which ones aren't, right? And so give us any of your thoughts about that down in the comment section. And last week, Bungie did talk about the 12-man PvE activities that players are jumping into at the moment, and have said that they're going to be fixing it a bit later on now. But Cosmo also replied on that subject and said, we're 100% aware that more players in activities is wildly popular, and the community wants to see more of it. Not promising anything, but definitely passing the feedback along. And of course, it does potentially open that interesting possibility to see even more players inside of PvE activities, always technically being limited to 6 for raids and some of the match-made activities we've had in the past. Could be a technical restraint that Bungie will find a way to work past. But also some feedback on the Bottomless Grief bonus. There's a Reddit post from Discourage, and they said that a perk that is inactive unless I have dead teammates is not an exciting feeling for a pinnacle reward. And DMG said we have been collecting this feedback and passing it along. The team is aware and will let you know if any changes are planned. So that would be an interesting one. Who knows, possible changes to that bonus itself. And I've got to say, I broadly agree with that. It's one of those perks that if you never find a use for it, and of course the use case is relatively rare in most situations, yeah, it just gives you that sort of sinking feeling. So I'm curious to see if they do bring any changes for that. Finally, a quick mention right here, but Kronicle, the Empress of the Cabal, seems to have taken over the Destiny the Game account on Twitter. And they said, I know you seek ever-growing power. Imagine the kind of weapon you're, and then stops and says Eris could turn Savathun into, refined by Cabal, the greatest weaponsmiths in the galaxy. Join my empire in glory. Bow. And so Kronicle is still trying to persuade us right there, and we're seeing an image of what will become the Proving Ground strike. Who knows? It seems pretty likely that Proving Grounds itself is going to be a big turning point in the story. Interesting reference of a weapon right there too. Kronicle also essentially accuses us on Twitter of failing to save Cayde 6. And when somebody said, you thought a single assassin could take out Zavala, cute, lady, you're about to have many god killers gunning for you, sort out your affairs. Kronicle replied, if I wanted to kill Zavala, I would look him in the eyes when I did it. A warrior deserves no less. And that sparked conversation about whether indeed the recent assassination attempt on Zavala was instigated by Kronicle. There are a few suggestions in the game. I kind of read it that a separate group of scions who were sort of doing their own thing were actually responsible for that, although we'll wait and see. But another tweet right here with a still image from an upcoming cutscene. Obviously this cutscene is upcoming and interesting considering Zavala in the recent cutscene we had for the assassination attempt didn't yet know who the crow actually was, it confirms that the story is going to have developed at least a little bit by the time we get to this cutscene. But nonetheless, it is something to look forward to in the future. And for today, guys, that is what we have to speak about in this video. So, as always, give us any of your thoughts about the stuff we've spoken about down in the comments section. And if you want to be kept up to date with the world of Destiny, feel free to get subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on anything. But otherwise, if you've enjoyed the video, a like rating down below does very much help us out on the channel. And for now, I hope you guys have an awesome day.